Hello and welcome to our next video, CSS property value pairs. In this video, we're going to explore some additional elements and properties that we can use to style with CSS. Just some common stuff that you may be interested in changing on your web page. So let's get into it. Here we're going to keep working with the All About Me page that I created. Made a few changes here. I've wrapped my code in the section container elements to just kind of better organize what I have going on. I made some changes here that are going to help me demonstrate some of the properties that I'm going to do. If you have questions about that, just ask me in class, and we can talk more about why you want to use these section container elements to organize your work. I'm going to focus here on this section, family section. We're going to come back to that in a minute. But first, let's get into my style. And right now, we have the content all here, and we're using all the same font. So in this font, I'm using just a general Times New Roman, which is the default font, that if you don't change it, then that's what it's going to be showing. So what I'm going to change it to here is going to be a Parada 1. And this isn't downloaded onto my computer. So in order for me to kind of get this onto my web page, I'm going to use Google Fonts here to help me put the code into my page and be able to use it. So this website here, fonts.google.com, takes you to this main page here. Let's get rid of this. And I just searched here Parada. It brings me up to Parada 1. If you click here on this, you can add it to your style, which I've already added it. So here's a little link that shows me everything I've selected, which so far is just the Parada 1. So what's nice about this is they have, as you saw, like 1,200 different types of styles and fonts that you can pick from. And once you decide what you want, a couple little copy and pasting that you need to do, and you can get it right onto your website. So I'm going to take this first copy here. This is to embed the font. We're going to put this into the head of the HTML. So I'm just going to Control-C that. We're going to come back over to demo.html, and let's go here, and I'm going to throw that right there. And we're going to go ahead and align this a little better, keep the page nice and clean. So I copied that code in here, which is actually 3 different links that are located in here. I'm not going to go too much into what this is about because you can explore it on your own. You don't really need to fully understand what it's doing. Just know that this is providing us a link to this font from Google Fonts. It is, it's linking, it's giving us the ability to put the code on our page. But if you notice here, if I refresh this, it didn't change my page at all, because all I've done was give myself the ability to change the font. I haven't actually changed the font yet. If you want to change the font, you got to come here to the CSS rules to specify which family is happening here. So I'm going to go ahead and copy this, and that's going to go into my CSS file. Where do I want to change? I want to change my H2s, H3s, H4s, all of my headings that I have on my page. I'm going to change that to the Parada 1. And I'm going to refresh this, and now you see the headings have changed because this is the line of code that changes the headings. All right? Now, it says font family because not all fonts are going to be able to be rendered onto your page. As I said, I don't have Parada 1 on my computer, so it's not able to render it without those links to the Google page. And if you notice, I put it into my demo.html. That one has the links. I put the actual font family into my CSS. And if you notice, this Parada 1, which is what I wanted it to show up as, is followed by a comma and then the word cursive. And that's because the Parada 1 is part of the cursive family. And I'm laying out kind of the sequence of attempts. I want these selectors to style the font as a Parada 1, understanding that not all computers are going to be able to do this, so I give it a backup. If you can't do Parada 1, just give me a basic general cursive font for these selectors. And you can see, because I have the link to the page on this HTML, it worked. All of these are styled the way I want. But I have this link to a secondary page, which is also using the same style CSS. But when I click over here, notice that the headings no longer are using that Parada 1, but it is using a cursive text. This is the default cursive. So it knows it's supposed to change the font for this heading, but it can't because it doesn't know Parada 1, so it's defaulting to cursive. Now, if I come over here, I take these links and I copy these into my demo 2, and then rerun it. And now you see I have more about me, and click, you see those headings then turn to the Parada 1 instead of the cursive, because now they're able to access all the capabilities. So you see both of those pieces of information are essential to being able to make it show up on your page properly. All right? So that's the font families and why we talk about families, because you want to give it some, you give it the style you want to show up, but then you got to provide it with a backup in case it's not able to render that font, that specific font. Okay, so that's changing the font. What if I wanted to change the size of the text? Well, that is going to go in here to this family here, and I'm going to say font size. And font size, you see there's lots of different ways to kind of change the size, and there's lots of different units of measurement. I'm going to stick with pixels again, just to keep it simple, just to stay consistent with how we're doing size with other things. And we'll go, say, 45 pixels. And when I refresh it, you see there, my font has gotten bigger. So if you want to change the actual size of the font, you do font size. And there we have a bigger font because I identified a font size that is larger. What about aligning your text? What if we want to kind of start centering some things? So we could come in here to our headings, and we could do a text align and then center. And what that's going to do is it's going to push all of my headings to the center of the page, and it's just going to align it horizontally centered. We'll get into some vertical alignment when we talk about the box model and some other things. But I want to show you kind of what happens here if I was to try to text align a list, because I've seen this come up a few times with some of you who are trying to center your list. Let's fix that. And let's see what happens when I center my list. So you notice now my dots have separated from my list items. The text is centered, but the dots are not centered. And so we can change that here with a few modifications of the property list style. So you see list style type, it's currently a disk that gets you the solid dot. You could change other types, you could change it. But we're going to go ahead and change list style position to be inside. And now when I refresh this, now you see the dots move inside with the names. But notice it's still not quite lined up here. So maybe if you're centering these lists, you don't really want those dots at all. So we're going to come back and we're going to talk about the list style type. And you see lots of different things you can choose from here. I'm going to choose none. And that's just going to completely get rid of the disk altogether by using list style type none. So if I'm using none, I really don't need this list style position. If you want to bring the disks inside and keep them, you use list style position inside. If you just want to get rid of them, then you use list style type none, and that will completely get rid of them. All right. So, that kind of shows you aligning text. Could be pretty straightforward with a text align center. But when you're doing that with list items, it could be a little tricky. So you might want to use some list style, either list style type or list style position, to adjust it to make it look a little nicer. The next thing I want to do here is centering images, because this has come up a few times as well, where people wanted to center an image and it's not really working very well. So I'm going to come down here and I'm going to give myself an IMG selector. And the issue with images is that images are displaying inline block, and if you try to text align, they're not really text. So it makes sense why you can't center it that way. So what I'm going to do here is change my display to be block. And when I change my display to be block, that allows me to adjust the margins. And we haven't really talked about margin yet, but we're going to do margin auto. And that's going to push it to the center. So displaying block kind of allows it to use the entire width of the page. Before, it was only able to use as much of the page as it contained, right? It was inline, so it only gets as much space as its width exists. But changing the display to block will allow it to take up the entire width of the page, and then the margin auto will allow it to adjust and push itself on each side, the left and right, so that now it's centered on the page. So these two lines of code, in most cases, will get you the ability to center an image, as long as that's the only image on the line. If you're trying to do something a little more complicated, then obviously centering the image is going to become a little more complicated as well. But now we've been able to center regular text, we've been able to center some list items, we've been able to center an image. Now, one more little feature I'm going to show you in this video before the end is to add a background image. All right, so we're going to come back into here, this family section, and I'm going to give myself a background image. And background image allows me to not just change the color of something, but to actually put a picture in the background and then to have text or other images on top of it and to kind of layer things on top. So we're going to give myself a background image, and I'm going to use a URL to be able to access that image location. Now, you could find an image on the internet and copy the image address and paste it right into here like we did with the IMG tag. But I have an image that is saved on my drive, so I'm just going to type in that address here, or that directory, and you see the directory is images, woods.jpg, And when I refresh that, you see this is now got a little background image, and it's filling up that space. Again, this space is elastic, so it's only big enough to hold these three names. If I was to add more content, it would get bigger. If I take out some content, it would get smaller. But my image right now is just taking up the space that I provided. So it's not showing you the whole image. So we're going to look at a few other background image choices. So if we go background, and we'll do background size, and I'm going to tell it to cover, and that didn't, there we go. And there we see it's now covering the space, but the height still doesn't give me the whole page. But now it's going to kind of convert the width to fit, the width of the picture fits the width of the element, because I've told it to size it to cover from the left side to the right side. So if I want to see more of the picture, I can go ahead and set the height, and let's make this about 500 pixels. And it's still not quite giving me what I want here. I kind of want more there, right? So we can do a background position, and we can do center and refresh. And let's see, let's make this a little bigger here, so we can get all of it in here. That should be enough. There we go. Okay, so one other feature, which isn't really coming up with the way I have this right now, is we could talk about background repeat, and we could set it to no repeat, because sometimes this will, if the picture is smaller, you'll see 4 or 5, 6, 7 pictures showing up, and you can stop that from happening by use background repeat, no repeat. So these are 4 of the most common background image attributes or properties that you may want to be able to style, to be able to get your background image to look nice. And so there we go. I think that looks pretty nice here, to be able to get the image here with some text on top of it, and to be able to see everything. So I hope this video was informative for you and able to show you a few more aspects of the page that you can style, making it look just a little bit nicer. We are going to continue on with this, and we'll take a look at the box model next and see how that, using padding and margin and all those aspects, can help you to make a nicer looking page as well. All right, I'll see you then.